Could a single $500 billion deal tip the entire balance of power in Europe? What's about to unfold with Trump's mining plan and Ukraine's reserves could dramatically reshape the geopolitical landscape once and for all. Amid intensifying global tensions, the United States has set its sights on a resource as ancient as the planet itself, yet vital to modern technology: minerals. Historically, these raw materials served as the backbone of industrialization. Today, however, they've become the currency of a geopolitical chessboard involving major powers and strategic alliances. And it's precisely here that the $500 billion proposal conceived by former President Donald Trump comes into play, a seismic move that could rock the stability of Ukraine and potentially all of Europe. Far from a straightforward investment plan, this mega-project emerges as an explosive gambit whose essence goes beyond economics. At its core is Ukraine's mineral wealth, vast deposits of titanium, lithium, and other elements critical for defense and advanced technology. On paper, the deal aims to rebuild and fortify Ukraine, promising security and prosperity. Yet beneath the surface, it conceals clauses capable of constraining Ukrainian sovereignty and even undermining its long-sought integration into the European Union. Picture for a moment Ukraine transformed into a silo of strategic minerals, targeted by multiple global powers. Through Trump's multi-billion-dollar proposal, the White House seeks to consolidate not only its military and economic influence in the region, but also to exert quiet control over the fate of a nation caught between two poles, the Western sphere and an increasingly assertive Russia. The scale of this agreement, described by some as the mining coup that could redefine the geopolitical map, raises pressing questions not just about Ukraine's security, but also the broader European balance of power. Appearances can be deceiving. More than a mere financial whim, this initiative is a calculated U.S. strategy to capitalize on the incalculable mineral potential of Ukraine. While the spotlight falls on the capital in fusion, the specter of dependency looms over Kiev. How far can the Ukrainian government go in accepting terms that may ultimately limit its freedom of action and jeopardize its dream of joining the European Union? The backdrop is as intricate as it is compelling. Ukraine, long a focal point of regional conflicts and territorial disputes, finds its valuable natural resources becoming a magnet for foreign interests. Though Trump's offer includes military and financial aid, crucial elements in times of crisis, it also introduces an outside control factor that could exact a heavy toll on the country's sovereignty. As this story unfolds, one unavoidable question arises. Will this help act as a stepping stone to recovery, or will it become a straitjacket from which Ukraine cannot break free? As we delve deeper, vivid maps and charts detailing the extent of Ukraine's mineral reserves underscore the sense of witnessing a global chess match, each choice carrying high stakes. Tension mounts. If Ukraine opts to sign, does it risk entanglement in a labyrinth of long-term obligations? If it refuses, might it lose the critical military and financial support it so badly needs? The colossal, $500 billion figure reflects the magnitude of this gamble. It's not only about resurrecting an economy battered by years of conflict, it's about redefining national security in an age of resource diplomacy. Although ambitious, Trump's plan faces heavy criticism. Many fear such agreements could set a dangerous precedent, turning vital resources into bargaining chips for peace or compliance. The White House's monumental $500 billion proposal quickly stirred waters beyond Ukraine's borders. While Ukrainian authorities weighed the pros and cons, a new and powerful player stepped into the spotlight, the European Union, led by Germany, determined to voice its firm dissent. In a matter of days, the corridors of Brussels and the government offices of Berlin teemed with outcries against what many saw as a dangerous display of U.S. mineral imperialism. Germany, the EU's leading economic power, made no attempt to soften its stance. Spokespersons for the German government labeled Trump's offer a threat to Ukrainian sovereignty and an affront to the principles of free competition within the Union. The bluntness of their statements left no doubt. Berlin viewed with grave concern the notion that any third country, regardless of its influence, could virtually take control of a candidate state's mineral resources. Underscoring these criticisms was a fundamental concept. Any international agreement involving a potential EU member must align with EU regulations, a cornerstone for maintaining cohesion and fair conditions among all member states. The wave of criticism intensified when Germany's foreign minister, speaking before the Bundestag, uttered a phrase that would echo endlessly in media outlets and political forums: "We will not allow Ukraine's future to be decided in a Washington office." With these words, she made it clear that Europe would not give a blank check to a unilateral agreement that might compromise Ukraine's accession process and weaken the regulatory framework the EU strives to uphold in areas like natural resource exploitation and fair market competition. Meanwhile, in Brussels, high-ranking officials within the European Commission echoed these sentiments, stressing that the sovereignty of a candidate country's resources cannot be subject to murky transactions. This direct reference to the rumored lack of transparency and hidden interests surrounding the deal only heightened alarm bells. Voices within the European Parliament demanded that Kiev clarify the exact terms and potential repercussions for the region before signing any pact. Some MEPs went so far as to brand the U.S. plan neo-colonial, a term as controversial as it was forceful, evoking historical specters of domination and resource control. One of the most notable moments of this diplomatic confrontation came when excerpts from a closed-door meeting between EU representatives and U.S. State Department envoys were leaked. According to these leaks, the European delegation had reiterated its concerns about the enormous decision-making power Washington sought to claim over Ukraine's mineral reserves, insisting that any agreement include an active role for European observers and concrete safeguards to protect Kiev's autonomy. These demands ran headlong into the stance of the U.S. negotiators, who stressed that the deal was a bilateral transaction and not subject to third-party interference. Discontent grew swiftly across the continent, and various European leaders joined the chorus of criticism. The chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs declared to the press, "Strategic mineral extraction cannot serve as a bargaining chip to impose security policies. It's a dangerous path contrary to the values of solidarity upon which the Union is founded." Austria's chancellor, for his part, warned that the proposed deal bore the hallmarks of a Trojan horse, the guise of economic and military aid that, in practice, would place Ukraine under the U.S. sphere of influence, almost irreversibly undermining its route to Europe. Amid this controversy, the phrase mineral imperialism began to take center stage in headlines and TV debates. The term was first used by a well-known French political analyst, who argued that the United States aimed to replace energy dependency with mineral dependency, thus maintaining its global hegemony in the transition toward new technologies and the green economy. The expression resonated on social media and was echoed by various European platforms demanding greater transparency and multilateral cooperation. Against this backdrop, tensions escalated to the point where some European leaders began publicly advocating for reinforced energy and mineral independence for the continent. Talk of creating a European Strategic Resources Consortium arose, which would allow the EU to manage its own reserves and agreements with third countries, free from external power influences. Though the proposal never left the drawing board, it underscored the rising distrust surrounding the role the United States might play in the future geopolitical reconfiguration of the region. The repercussions of the United States' multi-million-dollar proposal have swiftly placed Ukraine at the center of a historic dilemma. Should it accept Washington's massive mining plan, or should it bet on a future aligned with the standards and regulations of the European Union? While headlines decry mineral imperialism and European capitals unanimously reject any notion of unilateral control, the Kyiv government faces the most difficult decision in its modern history. The U.S. offer, led by former President Donald Trump, promises a $500 billion financial infusion and the military support needed to stabilize the region. Yet, as both Ukrainian and European analysts point out, this apparent largesse comes with the surrender of extraction rights to vast mineral resources that the country needs to rebuild its economy and eventually, to meet the requirements for EU membership. Hence, the dilemma becomes even more complex. While the United States offers significant short-term economic and military power, Brussels demands a more gradual approach that respects Ukrainian sovereignty, but does not immediately provide comparable levels of investment or defensive backing. At first glance, Washington's proposal dazzles with its sheer scale. That financial commitment would allow Ukraine to revive key industries, modernize infrastructure, and secure weaponry to deter outside interests in the region. However, critics in Kyiv note that accepting such a deal would effectively subordinate national development policies to U.S. dictates. Mineral resources represent not just an economic asset but also a strategic bargaining chip for reinforcing Ukraine's international standing and ultimately strengthening its EU candidacy. In contrast, the European powers, led by Germany, France, and the European Commission, offer a route more aligned with EU law and regional integration agreements. While they do not promise as dramatic a sum as the United States, they propose long-term reconstruction funds, technical assistance in institutional reforms, and assurances that mineral exploitation would conform to EU competition rules. In return, they require Kyiv to maintain its commitments to transparency, the rule of law, and harmonizing its national legislation with European standards. For many Ukrainian analysts, this path offers a slower but potentially more stable approach, minimizing the risk of geopolitical mortgages that could undermine the country's independence. Politically, President Volodymyr Zelensky finds himself torn between the urgency of bolstering national defense and stability and his people's desire to draw closer to Europe, a goal shaped by the Revolution of Dignity and prevalent in the country's agenda for the last decade. On one hand, American financial and military assistance appears to be a quick remedy for the immediate security and reconstruction needs arising from years of conflict and tension in the eastern regions. On the other hand, Brussels holds out the promise of a stable future fully integrated into the West, free from burdensome conditions that could evolve into a long-term straitjacket. Official statements reflect the delicate balance the Ukrainian government is trying to strike. Some of Zelensky's advisors emphasize that without U.S. support, Ukraine could miss a historic opportunity to revive its industrial base and protect itself from external aggression. Others, however, warn that an all-out pivot toward Washington would seriously endanger the country's EU bid and compromise its political and economic independence. From the European perspective, it is crucial for Ukraine to adhere to Brussels regulations, as a skewed agreement with the United States could violate fundamental EU clauses on competition, trade, and natural resource management. As the picture becomes clearer, it's evident that the choice isn't just about numbers or investment promises. It's a clash of two models, the promise of quick but conditional capital versus a gradual integration process founded on shared consensus and regulations. For Ukraine, saying yes to the U.S. proposal would fill its financial and military gap in the short term, but could jeopardize its long-term sovereignty. Opting for the European counterparts means following a slower, more laborious path, yet one that may ultimately prove more solid and respectful of national independence. Thus, at this critical juncture, Kyiv must weigh the strategic implications of every move. Can the country afford to reject immediate American assistance and risk delaying its recovery? Or would it be gambling too much by signing a pact that might mortgage its future within the European Union? This chapter shows Ukraine becoming an ideological battleground between two radically opposed visions. While Washington offers the promise of instant revival, Brussels advocates a transformation process that, though gradual, aims to be stable and enduring. Strategic minerals have always been the lifeblood of great powers. Throughout history, access to rare metals and compounds has defined the rise and fall of empires. Today, in the 21st century, their importance not only remains, but has intensified in light of new technologies, advanced weaponry, and the voracious demand for electronic devices in the global economy. Ukraine's vast mining potential underscores a phenomenon that transcends borders. the escalating silent war over control of the resources capable of shaping the future world order. To grasp the magnitude of this phenomenon, one need only consider the lengthy chain of industries and applications dependent on these strategic minerals. Titanium, for example, is vital to aerospace production due to its strength and lightness. Aircraft turbines, fuselages, and even the armor of military vehicles benefit from its unique properties. Lithium, dubbed the white gold of the 21st century, powers the rechargeable batteries found in everything from smartphones to next-generation electric cars. Meanwhile, graphite and cobalt are essential for electronics, specialized metallurgy, and the superalloys demanded by the world's most powerful militaries. The relevance of these minerals extends beyond civilian industries. They play a pivotal role in national defense. A country with control over deposits of rare earths or strategic metals enjoys a significant edge in producing missile systems, cutting-edge drones, and even more efficient anti-missile defenses. In times of geopolitical instability, guaranteed access to these resources can be the difference between external dependence and military self-sufficiency, a factor that can abruptly tip the balance of power. For precisely that reason, the dispute over Ukraine's mineral wealth is anything but an isolated case. It reflects a global struggle in which every bloc seeks to secure a stable supply of these minerals. From the U.S. perspective, solidifying access to lithium, titanium, or graphite deposits in Ukraine means reducing dependence on China and Russia, historical leaders in the extraction and supply of these elements. Europe, for its part, prioritizes ensuring that the handling of these resources does not violate the sovereignty of a potential member state or undermine fair competition principles and environmental sustainability. As for Russia, it remains keen on maintaining or expanding its influence over mineral-rich regions that once belonged to the Soviet Union, thus bolstering its geopolitical weight against the West. In this high-stakes game, alliances and trade agreements can shift rapidly, since controlling key extraction and refining points translates into immense negotiating power. A country that holds a monopoly or strong dominance over a critical mineral can, without exaggeration, bring industries and governments to their knees. Those that rely on its flow to manufacture goods as ubiquitous as mobile phones or as crucial as combat aircraft. Thus, the geopolitics of strategic minerals fuels tensions that go beyond traditional border disputes or ideological conflicts, morphing into an underground struggle where diplomacy, trade deals, and massive investments intersect with military maneuvers and historic rivalries. That is why some experts refer to this phenomenon as the silent war over the minerals that power empires. Silent, because it seldom dominates headlines with the same intensity as a direct armed conflict, yet its consequences can be just as far-reaching. From the lithium rush in South America to the extraction of rare earths in Africa and cobalt mines in the Congo, this conflict is unfolding worldwide, with multinational corporations and governments moving their pieces in pursuit of privileged access to the raw materials that will fuel the economy of the coming decade. As we've seen in earlier chapters, the Ukrainian case embodies all these factors in a single territory. A nation grappling with serious security challenges and a fragile economy, yet resting on a trove of resources that could place it at the forefront of high-tech industries. That mixture of institutional weakness and resource abundance is the perfect recipe for major powers to engage in fierce competition to lock in advantageous agreements. Hence, the question is not merely how much a mining contract is worth or how quickly extraction can begin, but rather who will ultimately wield real control over a mineral treasure that, if properly managed, could change the course of an entire nation. In this fourth chapter, we have delved into the importance of strategic minerals and how their control can drastically alter the international balance of power. These materials, almost invisibly, underpin military modernization, technological innovation, and even the transition to clean energy. Viewed in this light, the silent war over them is far from a mere commercial dispute. It is a geopolitical showdown that will determine which nations lead the future and which remain relegated to dependence. At this point, the web spun around the multi-million-dollar mining deal, the tensions within the European Union, and the power struggle among the United States and Russia has reached a boiling point. The gravitational pull of this conflict not only keeps Ukraine on edge but also shakes the foundations of regional and global geopolitics. In this final chapter, we attempt to discern the possible paths ahead and reflect on how this phenomenon could affect the international landscape in the coming decades. The first major question revolves around Ukraine. After rejecting, revising, or modifying the original U.S. proposal, can it forge new pacts that allow it to maintain autonomy while moving forward with its plans for European integration? Should Kyiv manage to balance the economic and military support it needs with respect for EU regulations and values, we could witness the emergence of a stronger Ukraine, potentially playing a key role in regional security and the economy. Yet if the pressure from Washington or Moscow intensifies, there is a real risk the country could find itself trapped in a permanent tug-of-war. Meanwhile, the European scene promises significant changes in how strategic resources are managed. The debates sparked in Berlin, Brussels, and Paris over so-called strategic autonomy point to the development of economic and energy defense mechanisms aimed at reducing dependence on external actors. We may see the creation of consortia or investment funds geared toward exploration and extraction of minerals within EU territory or in partner countries, in order to safeguard the bloc's interests and avert interference from rival powers. If these initiatives come to fruition, the European bloc could find itself in a stronger negotiating position while also reinforcing internal cohesion. In terms of transatlantic relations, the battle for resource control in Ukraine is testing the robustness of the long-standing alliance between the United States and Europe. While the old continent has traditionally been a key partner for Washington, disagreements over the mining deal and the concern about mineral imperialism undermine mutual trust. Many wonder whether this tension will affect not only economic cooperation, but also military and diplomatic coordination. In an environment of growing competition against powers like China and Russia, any fracture in the relationship between the EU and the US could reshape global alignments. Turning east, Russia's stance also plays a decisive role. Moscow's persistence in retaining or extending its influence over Ukraine's mining regions, as well as its willingness to offer alternate deals that might entice Kyiv, introduce further uncertainty. Depending on how the situation on the ground develops, especially in the eastern regions, we could see new military or diplomatic tensions that would affect access to resources. Without a lasting agreement or truce, the conflict could fester, with repercussions for the energy and economic stability of the entire continent. The long-term implications extend well beyond a single region. The race for strategic minerals is becoming a central axis around which much of 21st century geopolitics revolves. Major powers will strive to secure reliable sources of lithium, titanium, cobalt, and other raw materials critical for military and technological industries. In this context, securing supply chains under the umbrella of one power or alliance could mean near total dependency for those countries left outside. Might this become the new paradigm where mining self-sufficiency becomes the standard by which a nation's power is measured? In terms of the global economy, we can anticipate a reinforced trend toward regionalization and the formation of more clearly defined blocs. Trade agreements may increasingly center on ensuring the flow of these resources, relegating traditional tariff issues to the background. Moreover, the price of strategic minerals could skyrocket amid genuine or manufactured shortages, affecting the production of high-tech goods, and by extension, the daily lives of millions. Not only might the costs of mobile phones or electric cars surge, but critical defense and communications infrastructure might also grow more expensive. Diplomatically, the rise of resource diplomacy will foster ad hoc alliances among countries that share mining interests or need the same raw materials. Nations that previously lacked close ties might join forces to negotiate more favorable agreements, while existing allies might diverge in response to competition over these materials. In this shifting mosaic, flexibility and long-term vision will be key for those aiming to lead the new order. Amid all these factors, one thing is clear: the geopolitical chessboard is being rearranged before our eyes. The struggle over control of Ukrainian resources is just a reflection of broader global trends, searching for strategic autonomy, fearing a loss of industrial competitiveness, and seeking protection from political and economic volatility. As in a game of chess, each move, each agreement, each alliance can determine a country's victory or stagnation. Thus, we conclude our story aware that despite outlining a broad panorama of interests and scenarios, the final outcome is still unwritten. Geopolitics is fluid, and the rapid evolution of alliances and technologies only heightens uncertainty. Will Ukraine ultimately lean toward the United States, or will it solidify its European trajectory? Will Russia cement its position in the mining regions, or will a new international player emerge, one capable of redefining the rules of the game entirely? The final move remains undecided in this geopolitical chess match. All eyes now turn to governments, investors, and ordinary citizens, each of them witnesses and potentially participants in the next great transformation of international relations. Whatever is decided regarding strategic minerals and Ukraine's path forward will resonate far beyond its own borders, heralding perhaps a new era in how we understand global politics.